Hello everyone and welcome to Skein Spider. There were a couple of setbacks in this pattern and the result of that is this is going up much later than I intended, but it is finally here, the reversible ditto plush pattern. Ta-da! In this video, we're going with the Ditto Jigglypuff combination. If you happen to see the Snorlax version, this one over here, that pattern will be out at some point. The reason I didn't do that today or in this video is that those setbacks I mentioned, one of them was I was sent the wrong shade of blue yarn and it wasn't even a close match for Snorlax, so I couldn't even really get away with making it anyway. Thankfully, I had enough pink yarn to make Jigglypuff, but the Snorlax pattern is going to be coming at some point in the future, as well as some other Pokemon. I have a Gengar pattern already mostly finished, so that'll be out at some point too. If you have a specific Pokemon that you would like to see reversified, let me know what that is down in the comments below. I can't guarantee it'll get made, but I do want to make a lot more of these reversible guys, so there is a chance. So let me know what you'd like to see and I will take all your ideas on board. Before we actually get into this pattern, what I want to do is just inform you guys that I had some audio issues making this video. Nothing major, I just had to re-record some of the audio. So if you're crocheting this pattern and you come to a section and you think the audio and video don't quite sync up, that is the reason why. So it shouldn't affect the pattern overall, but if you do have any issues, put them down in the comments and I'll do my best to help you. But again, I don't think it's going to affect the pattern overall. It wasn't that big a deal. And I think that was all I had to cover. So let's get right to it. Grab your hooks and let's get started. To make a reversible ditto, you're going to need a 3.5mm hook, scissors, stitch markers. I would recommend a minimum of 6. A needle, pins, stuffing, 8-ply yarn in the colours of purple and black for ditto, as well as the specific colours for the other Pokemon you want to make. I would also recommend that you use cotton yarn, or at least a blend. You can use acrylic. The only trouble I find with that is that it tends to get the fuzzies after you've reversed it a couple of times, but if you want to use acrylic, you absolutely can. The last thing you're going to need is some safety eyes. I'm going to be using 14mm, and you're either going to need 1 pair or 2, depending on whether you want to add them to both Pokemon or not. We're going to start off with the easy bit and make the arms first. For that, we're going to need our 3.5mm hook and our purple yarn. We're going to begin with a magic circle, and in the magic circle we're going to put 6 single crochet. Round 2 is 6 increases, and an increase is just 2 single crochet in the same stitch. At the end of round 2, we should now have 12 stitches in our round, and round 3 is just 12 single crochet. Round 4 is 1 single crochet, 1 increase, repeated 6 times. Round 5 is 18 single crochet. For round 6, we're going to start with 1 single crochet. In the next stitch, we're going to do an increase, 1 and 2. And then what we're going to do is repeat 2 single crochet, 1 increase 5 times. After you've done that 5th increase, you should have 1 stitch left in the round, and we're just going to pop a single crochet into that. At the end of round 6, there should now be 24 stitches in your round, and both rounds 7 and 8 are each going to be 24 single crochet. Round 9 is going to be the final round of our arm, and it's going to be 7 single crochet, 1 increase, repeated 3 times. When you're finished, we're just going to cut a tail that we can use to sew the arm on later. And then we can go on to the body. When you've crocheted both of the arms, we're going to go on and crochet the body. And the body is one piece. But how we're going to start off is by making 2 separate pieces for the head bumps. So we're going to make one first, and then you're going to cut the yarn from that, and we're just going to set that aside. And then we're going to crochet a second. This second one that we crochet, we're going to leave on the hook. We're not going to cut the yarn. And then we're going to crochet these 2 pieces together. And from that point, continue on to crochet the rest of the body. So we're going to start with the second head bump. Well, for me, it's the second head bump. For you, it might be the first. So we're going to begin with a magic circle. And then round 1 is 6 single crochet in the magic circle. And 6, close that up. Round 2 is 6 increases. For round 3, we're going to begin with 3 single crochet and stitch marker in. Two and 3. And then we're going to do 3 increases in a row. First increase, second increase, and third increase. For the second half of this round, we're just going to repeat the same pattern. We're going to do 3 single crochet followed by 3 increases. Round 4 is just 18 single crochet. Round 5 is going to be the final round of the head bump piece, and we're going to do 2 single crochet, 1 increase, and repeat that 6 times. When you've finished round 5, how you proceed from here depends on what piece you've just crocheted. If it's the first piece, what you're going to do now is cut just a short tail and then pull up with your hook. If you finish off with a slip stitch, which I'm not going to be doing, but if you do, just remember in the next part that the slip stitch does not count as a stitch in the round. If it's the first head bump that you've made, cut this piece, set it aside and crochet the second. But if it is your second piece, like it is with me, what we're now going to do is join them together. We're going to begin that process by crocheting 7 single crochet into the piece that's still on our hook. We're going to do 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7. When you've done that 7th single crochet, you're going to put down the piece that's on your hook and then grab your first head bump piece that you made and a stitch marker. And what we're going to do with this stitch marker is insert it into stitch number 20. When we finished crocheting these head bump pieces, we should have had 24 single crochet in our final round, which was round 5. We're going to take this stitch marker and insert it into stitch number 20 of that final round. So I'm just going to count backwards from the last stitch. 24, 23, 22, 21, and 20. At this point, you can pick up the piece that's still on your hook. And then we're going to grab the first piece, the one we just inserted the stitch mark into, and we're going to line them up together. So if you look down from the top, I'm holding them like that. So the right sides of my stitches are facing downwards. And that stitch marker I just inserted is going to line up with my hook. So roughly like this. Like that. To crochet these two pieces together, I'm first going to insert my hook into the first piece, the one that's not yet attached. And I'm going to insert my hook into stitch number 20, and that's where we just inserted the stitch marker. I'm going to start from inside the piece, or the wrong sides of my stitches, and I'm going to push my hook out through to the right sides of my stitches. So I'm working from inside the piece to outside the piece. I don't need that stitch marker anymore, so I can set that aside. From here, we're going to go straight into the piece that was still on our hook, and we should be working through stitch number 8. Because we did 7 single crochet to start off with, the next stitch that we need to work with is stitch number 8. So I'm going through here, and this time I'm going from the right side of my stitches out through the wrong sides of my stitches. Once I've gone through both pieces, the first piece and the second piece, I'm going to yarn over and pull through. So I have 2 loops on my hook, and I'm going to yarn over and pull through those 2 loops to complete my single crochet. We're going to repeat this twice more because we're going to join the 2 pieces together for 3 stitches. We've just done 1, now we're going to do the second. For the second joining single crochet, we're going to first work into what would be stitch 19 of the first piece we made. And once again, I'm going from the wrong sides of my stitches, or the inside to the outside. So I'll insert my hook through there like that. From there, I'm going straight through the next stitch in my second piece, the one that was still on my hook, and that would have been stitch number 9. Go through that stitch and single crochet. We're going to do that once more into stitch 18 of the first piece, out of stitch number 10 of the second piece, and single crochet. And that's how we join them together. That's all we're going to do, just 3 single crochet. To finish off this joining part, we're going to single crochet into the next free stitch of the piece that was still on our hook, the second one that we made. I'm going from this point where I've joined the stitches straight into the next free stitch. This stitch that we've just made is going to become the new start of our round. So I'm going to take my stitch marker from where it was originally, and I'm just going to pop it into this stitch here. So the one we just made after joining our pieces together for 3 single crochet. After all that, we should now have 42 stitches in our round, and that includes each piece. When these 2 pieces were separate, we finished with 24 stitches in the final round for each piece, and we just joined them together for 3 stitches. That leaves 21 free stitches in each piece. And like I said before, that leaves us with 42 stitches all up. Round 6 is going to be again worked in both pieces, and we're going to do 13 single crochet, 1 increase, repeated 3 times. The first single crochet of this round has already been crocheted. That was the one where we put our stitch marker in. So we're going to continue by doing 12 more here. After those first 13 single crochet, we're going to do an increase. Then we're going to do our second lot of 13 single crochet, 1, when you're crocheting this second lot of 13 single crochet, what will happen is you will come up against the join where the 2 pieces were single crocheted together. The next stitch that you need to work into is the free stitch on this first piece, and we want to skip the 2 pieces that are joined together. So if I bring this up nice and close, and let's focus up, you can hopefully see the yarn here, joining these two stitches together. So this stitch here and this stitch here. I'm going to work over those and straight into this stitch, which is the next free one after this joining one. So I'm going to go from this point straight across here and single crochet. And then I'm going to continue crocheting the rest of my 13 stitches. But what I'm also going to do at this point is work over this tail end that I left when I cut this head bump piece. And like I said before, if you ended up slip stitching, your slip stitch doesn't count as a stitch in the round, so you want to work over that as well. And then we're just going to finish up with our final repeat of 13 single crochet, 1 increase. After round 6, we should now have 45 stitches in our round, and then round 7 is just going to be 45 single crochet. Round 8 is 14 single crochet and an increase repeated 3 times. Round 9 is 48 single crochet. Round 10 is 15 single crochet, 1 increase, repeated 3 times. Round 11 is 51 single crochet. Round 12 is 16 single crochet, 1 increase, repeated 3 times. Round 13 is 54 single crochet. Round 14 is 26 single crochet, 1 increase, repeated twice. Round 15 is just 56 single crochet. Round 16 is 27 single crochet, 1 increase, repeated twice. Round 17 is 58 single crochet. Round 18 is 28 single crochet, 1 increase, repeated twice. Round 19 is 60 single crochet. Round 20 is 19 single crochet, 1 increase, repeated 3 times. Round 21 is 63 single crochet. Round 22 is 20 single crochet, 1 increase, repeated 3 times. Round 23 is 66 single crochet. From this point, all of our increase rounds are going to be increased by 6 rather than the 2 or 3 that we've been using. So round 24 is going to be 10 single crochet, 1 increase, repeated 6 times. Both rounds 25 and 26 are each going to be 72 single crochet. Round 27 is 11 single crochet, 1 increase, repeated 6 times. Both rounds 28 and 29 are each 78 single crochet. Round 30 is 12 single crochet, 1 increase, repeated 6 times. Both rounds 31 and 32 are 84 single crochet. When you've finished round 32, take out your hook and secure your end. And what we're going to do now is the 3 little bumps down the bottom, and we're going to do these one at a time. To make it a little bit easier, I would recommend you grab 4 additional stitch markers. You're going to place 1 in stitch 11, 1 in stitch 38, 1 in stitch 53, and 1 in stitch 80. When you've got them all in, I would recommend double checking that they're in the correct stitches, just because it is very important that they are in those correct positions for the next step. So again, the stitches that the stitch markers need to be in are stitch number 11, stitch number 38, 53 and 80. When that's done, we can reinsert our hooks, and we're going to begin by crocheting the left bottom bump here. For these bumps that we're going to be creating, in the written pattern down the bottom, I am going to be breaking it up into parts A, B, C, etc. Just for clarity's sake. I think it's a little bit easier to understand that way. So what we're going to be crocheting now is round 33, and we're going to start off with round 33A, which is 38 single crochet. As you crochet, so I'm going to crochet stitch number 1, and I'll just pop my stitch marker back in here. As you begin crocheting, make sure you put the stitch mark here, this is stitch number 11, back in. So I'm going to crochet the first 11 and 10, take out stitch marker 11, and then single crochet stitch number 11 and place that back in. You're then just going to continue crocheting all the way around until you hit the second stitch marker, which should be in stitch number 38. So we're going to have to do the same to this stitch marker as we did here. We're going to take it out, do our last single crochet of round 33A, and then pop that back in. 27, and then 38. My spider's grabbing onto my yarn. Anyway, round 33, part B, is going to be to chain 8. From where we crocheted into stitch number 38, where our stitch marker still is, we're just going to begin chaining. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8. From this point, we're going to begin to shape the first bump, and to do that, we're going to take the end of our chain, and then you're going to bring the head of your hook over to stitch number 11, where that first stitch mark is. So it's easier to turn your work so you're looking at stitch number 11 from the front side or the right sides of your stitches. And you also want to make sure that your chain doesn't twist. So we want to keep that nice and straight. From that 8th chain, what we're going to do is round 33, part C, and all that is joining our chain to stitch number 11 with a single crochet. So I'm going to go into stitch number 11, and once again, just make sure your chain doesn't twist. So into stitch number 11, I can take that out for now. And I'm going to single crochet. This single crochet that I've just done to join the chain to stitch 11 is going to become stitch number 1 of my left bottom bump here. So I'm going to take my stitch marker that I just took out and pop that back in. My original start of the round, which is this darker blue stitch mark in the middle, we're going to leave that in because we'll need that a bit later on. But for this particular section, this is now our starting point. For round 34, we're going to do 36 single crochet, and how we're going to do that is we're going to work all the way across what was round 33, so where we did those, or some of those 38 single crochet in round 38 part A, and then we're going to work across the front loops of the chain. We've done our first single crochet of this round. That's where our stitch marker is, our joining single crochet from round 33 part C. I'm going to continue single crocheting all the way around until I hit my second stitch marker, which was stitch 38. So that is 1, 2, 27, and then stitch number 28 should be where our stitch marker is. So I'm going to take that out and I'm going to single crochet into there. From this point, we're going to, I think I said front loop before, I meant to say back loop. From this point, we're going to work into the back loops of the chain. We chained 8, so there should be 8 back loops for us to work into. The first one here, I'm going to go into the back loop and single crochet. If I can get my hook in correctly, there we go, and single crochet. What I like to do at this point, this isn't strictly necessary, but if you're someone who likes to have a visual aid, it can be helpful, is take the stitch marker that I just took out from the stitch here, and I'm going to place that into the front loop, the first front loop. So I just worked into the back loop. That's where I did my single crochet, and in that front loop from that chain, I've placed my stitch marker. The reason I'm doing this is later on, when we do the center bump, we're going to need to work into those front loops, and sometimes they can get hidden, they can be a little bit difficult to see. So I like to have a stitch marker in the first and last front loop just to mark out their position so I don't lose them. So I've done stitch number 1 across the chain. We're going to keep going, number 2, number 3, number 4, five, 7, and come on. Oh man, why are you being so difficult? There we go, number 8. And like I did at this, oh, this stitch is giving me trouble. All right, redo. Number 8, finally. Okay, like I did at the start of the chain, I'm going to take a spare stitch marker and mark out the last front loop. So again, just so I know where the start and the end of my chain is. From this point, crocheting gets a little bit easier because we can actually see all our stitches much more clearly now. We don't have to work across the chain. And at the end of round 34, we should have had 36 single crochet in total. For round 35, we're going to start off with 2 single crochet. 1 and 2. And then we're going to do an invisible decrease. To make an invisible decrease, we're going to work into the front loops of the next 2 stitches. Go under the first front loop, go straight under the second front loop, then yarn over, pull through both of those front loops, and at this point you should have 2 loops on your crochet hook, yarn over and pull through both of those. And that's your invisible decrease finished. We're going to continue this round by doing 4 single crochet, 1 decrease repeated 5 times, and then finish off with 2 single crochet. After round 35, we should now have 30 stitches in our round, and round 36 is just going to be 30 single crochet. Round 37 is 3 single crochet, 1 decrease repeated 6 times. Round 38 is 1 single crochet followed by 1 decrease, and then 2 single crochet, 1 decrease repeated 5 times, and we're going to finish off the round with 1 more single crochet. Round 39 is 1 single crochet, 1 decrease repeated 6 times. The final round of this first back bump, round 40, is just going to be 6 decreases. When you finish that final round, you're just going to cut a short tail, and then we're going to finish off. Grab your needle, and we're just going to thread the tail end through that. And to close up this hole, we're going to go under the front loops of the final 6 stitches. Start from behind the front loop, push your needle under it and forward towards you. 1, and then we're going to repeat that on the other 5. Pull on that yarn until the hole closes up. And then you're going to insert your needle directly into the center of round 40 between all your stitches. And for this part, you may need to turn a portion of your work inside out. And all we're going to do to secure this end is to weave it in through the backs of our stitches, because we don't want this to come undone as we're reversing our ditto back and forth. When we've finished the first back bump, we're going to go on and crochet the second one. We're going to start this second one from stitch number 53. Of the original 4 stitch markers we put in stitches 11, 38, 53 and 80, 53 was the third one. That is where we're starting now. So insert your hook into stitch number 53. It's going to take that out for now. Bring in your purple yarn, and we're just going to line that up behind our crochet hook, and then we're going to slip stitch to join. So I'm pulling my yarn through, and then I'm going to slip stitch to join. This slip stitch doesn't count as a stitch in our round, so I'm going to work my first single crochet back into that same stitch, and I will just do that now. And then my stitch marker goes back in. This stitch now becomes the start of our second bump. Like with the first one we did, I will be breaking up the written pattern into parts A, B, C, etc. for round 33. So this time, round 33 part A is going to start with 28 single crochet, and we're going to work our way from the first stitch marker in stitch 53 to the last stitch mark we placed, which was in stitch 80. Another thing I'm going to be doing is working over this tail end of my joined yarn just to secure it. If you would prefer though, you can weave it in through the backs of your stitches. And stitch 28 should be where our fourth stitch marker was. Round 33 part B is to chain 8. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 and 8. And like we did with the first bump, we're going to be joining this chain to the stitch marker, or the stitch, not the stitch marker, to the first stitch on the other side. Again, like we did before, you're going to take the head of your hook over to that stitch, making sure that your chain doesn't twist. We're going to join our chain to the stitch where our stitch marker is for row 33 part C. I'm just going to single crochet into this and then put my stitch marker back in because this is the start of our round. Rounds 34 through to 40 are going to be the same as the first back bump we did. So we're going to be starting off here with round 34, which is 36 single crochet. We're going to do this part together, so I'll show you how to single crochet around and then work across the chain again, just because that step is a little bit more tricky than the rest. But for rounds 35 through to 40, what I will be doing is placing a timestamp down in the description as well as the pinned comment, so you can go back and see the written pattern for all of those. So I'm just going to be crocheting through them. I will read them out, but I'm not going to have the written pattern for each of those. If you need the written pattern, just go down to the description, click on the timestamp, and you can use the same written pattern for this section as we did for this section. So we're going to begin round 34 here with 36 single crochet. .27, and then stitch 28 should be where our fourth stitch marker used to be in stitch 80. 28, and then we're going to work 8 single crochet across the back loops of the chain. I'm going into the first chain, or the back loop of the first chain, and like I did with this bump, I'm going to take some spare stitch markers and just pop them into the front loop. That's my first front loop. I'm going to continue single crocheting across the chain. And no, why is it the 8th chain always gives me trouble? There we go, didn't take as long as the last one. And number 8, and again I'm just putting a stitch marker into the front loop from this chain. Like I said earlier, from this point, which is round 35, the decrease rounds are going to be the same as they were for the first bump that we did. So round 35 is going to be 2 single crochet, 1 decrease, and then 4 single crochet, 1 decrease, repeated 5 times. Finish off with 2 single crochet. Round 36 is just 30 single crochet. Round 37 is 3 single crochet and a decrease, repeated 6 times. Round 38 is 1 single crochet, 1 decrease, then 2 single crochet, 1 decrease, repeated 5 times, finishing off with 1 single crochet. Round 39 is 1 single crochet, 1 decrease, repeated 6 times, and the final round, round 40, is just 6 decreases. Again, if you need the written patterns, the timestamp will be down in the description and the pinned comment. When you've finished round 40 of the second bump, we are going to do the same thing we did on the first one by closing it up and weaving in our ends. Lastly, we're going to be doing the center bump, although this has a few less rounds than these two because we still need to leave this part open for our other Pokemon to fit in. We're going to join our yarn this time at our original starting point. So back in round 32, before we did these 2 bumps here, we had our stitch marker from doing the rest of the body. So this was stitch 1 from that. We're going to insert our hook into there, like so, and then we're going to join our yarn the same way we did here. Line up the yarn behind your crochet hook, yarn over, pull through, and then slip stitch to join. Again, this slip stitch doesn't count as a stitch in our round, so our first single crochet is going to go back into the same stitch. And there we go. Also, like the other 2, I'm going to be starting off round 33 of the center bump by breaking it up into parts A, B, C, and so on. Round 33, part A, is 10 single crochet, and that should take us to the edge of the first bump that we did. Round 33, part B, is 8 single crochet across the other side of that chain we did. Originally, when we did the first bump here, we chained 8, and then we worked into the back loops of that chain to create our little bump here. This time we're going to be using the leftover front loops. If, like me, you placed a stitch marker in the first and last front loops, this should make this part a little bit easier. We're going to go into this first one we've marked out, and if I can actually get it out, there we go, and we're going to single crochet into that. And then we're going to continue single crocheting across the front loops of that chain until we reach the second stitch marker. That is 8 single crochet all up. Next, we're going to be working across the back here. From the first bump that we did to the second bump, there should be 14 free single crochet in between. They're the stitches we're going to work into. So if you look closely at this part here, let me focus up, you can see this stitch here has been worked into. You can see the yarn there. So this is the one we're going to start with. We're going to bring our hook down to that stitch and then single crochet into it. And then we're going to do 14 all the way across, keeping in mind that we've already done our first one. Now that we're up against the next chain, the one we made in our second bump, we're going to do the same thing we did in the first one here. Working into the front loops, we're going to do 8 single crochet across the chain. The final part of round 33 is going to be 4 single crochet. We're going to take the head of our crochet hook down into the next free stitch. Again, this one you can see it's been worked into to create this bump. We're going into the free one here, and we're just going to do 4 single crochet. 1, 2, 3, and 4. At the end of all that, we should have 44 stitches in our round. We have 10 at the start here, another 8, 14, 8 across the other chain, and we finished with 4. That gives us 44 in total. Round 34 is just going to be 44 single crochet. Round 35 is 20 single crochet, 1 decrease repeated twice. And then round 36, which is going to be our final round, we're just going to do 42 single crochet. And that is round 36 done. From this point you have a few options. If you don't want to make a reversible Pokemon, instead you'd rather just have a Ditto plush, continue decreasing by 6 every round until you get to 6 single crochet, and then just finish off like we've done for the other 2 little bumps. Make sure you add some stuffing first before you do that, but you can just turn this into a Ditto plush. If you do want to make a reversible Pokemon though, you've got 2 options now. You can either cut a short tail and then weave that in. If you do that, you need to make sure to leave a longer tail on the body of your second Pokemon. That way you can sew the 2 together, or you can leave the longer tail on your Ditto here, which is what I'm going to do, and you can cut a short tail and weave in that end on your second Pokemon. It really comes down to how much yarn you have left over for each Pokemon. So I've got quite a bit of purple left, so I'm going to leave a longer purple tail, but with my pink, I might be playing yarn chicken on that one, so that's why I've chosen to leave the shorter tail for that. And I'm just going to pull up with my hook. And before we get to crocheting our little Jigglypuff, we're going to add the eyes and the mouth. I'm going to be using a pair of 14mm safety eyes. Ditto's eyes are actually a bit smaller than this, but I think this looks cuter, so that's what I'm going with. We're going to place the eyes between rows 9 and 10, about 7 or 8 stitches apart. You want to go to your top bumps and pick one, doesn't matter which one, and we're going to count out from round 1 until we reach round number 9. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Between rounds 9 and 10, we're going to place the first eye. And then I'm going to count out about 7 or 8 stitches. And then see how you like the look of that. These round placements are more of an estimate. You can really place the eyes anywhere you want to, but I think that looks okay. Actually, you know what? I might move it down 1 round. Okay, so now it is between, my eyes are between rounds 10 and 11. 8 stitches apart, and yeah, I think I like the look of that. So when your eyes are in place, put the backs on. If you would prefer not to use safety eyes, if you'd rather crochet some eyes in black yarn, all you need to do is put 6 single crochet in a magic circle and then sew those on. So it's a very, very simple pattern, so you can do that if you prefer. Once you've got your eyes on, so whether you've used safety eyes or you've crocheted your own, we're going to add the mouth. For the mouth, we're going to need our black yarn and our 3.5mm hook. And then 2 rounds down from the bottom of the eyes, we're going to insert our hook into the space between the rounds. And you can make the mouth as wide as you want. I'm going to start my mouth so that the first stitch will be in line with the inner side of the right safety eye. Before you join your black yarn, make sure you leave a fairly long tail at this starting point. This yarn will just need to be long enough that you can weave it in through the backs of these stitches later on to secure the mouth. We're going to join this yarn pretty much the same way that we rejoined our purple yarn when we were creating the bottom bumps. We're going to pull the yarn through and then slip stitch. However, this time the slip stitch does count as a stitch in our row, because what we're going to do is slip stitch in a straight line all the way across the Ditto until we reach the other eye. To begin, go back into that same space between the rounds, only 1 stitch across this time, and slip stitch again. And you're just going to repeat this over and over. If you would prefer, you can use a single crochet to do this instead, but I find they stand out a little bit too much because it's a taller stitch. It ends up a little bit more 3D than I like. When you're finished, you're just going to cut a tail and then pull up with your hook. Again, this tail needs to be fairly long so you have enough yarn to weave it in securely. Then you're going to grab your needle and one at a time thread each of the tail ends that you've left into the body so that they end up inside of your ditto. When you've pushed the second tail end through to the inside, you can leave your needle threaded. At this point, turn your ditto inside out, or at least partially inside out, because it's much easier to work this way. And then starting with the second tail end where your needle is still threaded, weave that end in through the backs of the stitches nice and securely. When that's done, you're going to do the same thing with your first tail end. When you finish doing that, just turn your ditto back out the right way. And after all of that, we should now have a complete ditto body piece, as well as 2 ditto arms. And with ditto complete, we can now go on to crocheting our second Pokemon. We're going to start our Jigglypuff by making the body, and for that you're going to need your 3.5mm hook as well as your pink yarn. Now, before we begin, I'm just going to inform you all that I will be playing Yarn Chicken today. I've got all these little bits of pink yarn left over. If at some point in this pattern I end up using a slightly different shade of pink, the reason will be that I ran out of this one. I'm hoping that I've got enough to complete the entire Jigglypuff, but we shall have to see. So I'm going to begin by just using up this tiny little piece. And that will mean that at certain points I will be stopping to join in my next bit of yarn, my next leftovers, but you can just ignore that part and continue crocheting the pattern as normal. So we're going to begin by putting 6 single crochet in a magic circle for round 1. Round number 2 is going to be 6 increases. Round 3 is 1 single crochet, 1 increase, repeated 6 times. Round 4 is going to start off with 1 single crochet, and then we're going to repeat 2 single crochet, 1 increase 5 times, and finish off our round with 1 single crochet. Round 5 is 3 single crochet and an increase repeated 6 times. Round 6 starts off with 2 single crochet, and then we're going to repeat 4 single crochet, 1 increase 5 times, and then finish off with 2 more single crochet. Round number 7 is 5 single crochet and an increase repeated 6 times. Round 8 is 3 single crochet followed by an increase, then 6 single crochet, 1 increase repeated 5 times, and then lastly 3 single crochet. Round 9 is 7 single crochet and an increase repeated 6 times. Round 10 begins with 4 single crochet, and then we're repeating 8 single crochet, 1 increase 5 times, and finishing off with 4 single crochet. At the end of round 10, there should now be 60 stitches in total in your round, and round 11 is just going to be 60 single crochet. Round 12 is 9 single crochet and an increase repeated 6 times. Round 13 is 66 single crochet. Round 14 starts off with 5 single crochet and then an increase. After that, repeat 10 single crochet, 1 increase 5 times, and then finish the round with 5 more single crochet. When round 14 is finished, there should now be 72 stitches in total in your round, and then rounds 15 all the way through to 28 are each going to be 72 single crochet. Round 29 is 10 single crochet, 1 decrease, repeated 6 times. Round 30 is 60 single crochet. Round 31 is 9 single crochet, 1 decrease, repeated 6 times. Round 32 is 60 single crochet. Round 33 is 8 single crochet, 1 decrease, repeated 6 times. Round 34 is 7 single crochet, 1 decrease, repeated 6 times. Round 35 is going to be the final round in our Jigglypuff body, and it is going to be 6 single crochet, 1 decrease, repeated 6 times. When you've finished, you're going to need to cut your yarn, and the length that you cut is going to depend on the length that you left on the Ditto piece. For my Ditto piece, I left a long tail, and I'm going to use that to join the 2 pieces together. And that means in my Jigglypuff piece, I only need to cut a short tail, and then I'm going to weave that in through the backs of my stitches. If you did the opposite, if you left a short tail on your Ditto piece, you're going to need to leave a long tail here. So I'm going to pull up with my hook. I'm just going to weave this tail end in through the backs of my stitches so it's nice and secure. Next up, we're going to be crocheting Jigglypuff's arms, and the pattern for that is actually very similar to the Ditto's arms. We're going to begin round 1 with 6 single crochet. Round 2 is 6 increases. Round 3 is just 12 single crochet. Round 4 is 1 single crochet, 1 increase repeated 6 times. Round 5 is 18 single crochet. Round 6 is 5 single crochet, 1 increase repeated 3 times. Both rounds 7 and 8 are 21 single crochet. When you're finished, you're just going to cut a tail for sewing, and then you'll need to make a second arm, and after that we can go on to crocheting the legs. For the legs, what we're going to do is sort of crochet 3/4 of a leg. Because the bottom of each Pokemon is where we're going to be reversing it, we can't actually place the legs on the bottom of the Jigglypuff where they would normally go. So instead, what this is going to look like is something like this. So it makes the Jigglypuff look like it's sitting down. So the legs are going to be placed at the front of the piece, towards the bottom, but at the front. And yeah, we can get that in the frame there. That's what it's roughly going to look like. We are going to begin crocheting the legs by putting 6 single crochet in a magic circle for round 1. Round 2 is 6 increases. For round 3, we're going to do 3 single crochet followed by 3 increases repeated twice. Round 4 is 18 single crochet. Round 5 is 8 single crochet, 1 increase repeated twice. Rounds 6 through to 10 are each going to be 20 single crochet. Round 11 is 8 single crochet and a decrease repeated twice. Round 12 is 18 single crochet. When round 12's finished, what we're going to do is just add a little bit of stuffing. You don't need much, we're only going to stuff the legs lightly. So I'm just going to take a little bit and insert it in here. And then what we're going to do is single crochet these 2 sides together to close the piece up. To do that, go into stitch number 1, and then instead of single crocheting at that point, go straight out of stitch 18. So we worked into the first stitch and then out of the last stitch. At this point you can single crochet, and then we're going to repeat that again. We're going to go into the second stitch, straight out of stitch number 17 and single crochet. Once more into stitch number 3, out of stitch number 16 and single crochet. And you're just going to continue this all the way along. You should have 9 single crochet to do in total because we had 18 stitches left over in our last round, and reducing that by half is going to give us 9. And when you're done, just leave a tail for sewing. Next up, we're going to make the ears. And the ears consist of two separate parts. We have the outer part of the ear and the inner ear. We're going to start with the outer part, so you're still going to be needing your pink yarn for that. We're going to begin with a magic circle and putting 6 single crochet in that magic circle for round 1. Round 2 is 1 single crochet, 1 increase, repeated 3 times. Round 3 is 2 single crochet, 1 increase, repeated 3 times. Round 4 is just 12 single crochet. Round 5 is 3 single crochet, 1 increase, repeated 3 times. Round 6 is 4 single crochet and an increase, repeated 3 times. Round 7 is 5 single crochet and an increase, repeated 3 times. Round 8 is 6 single crochet, 1 increase, repeated 3 times. To finish off the ear, what we're going to do is single crochet the 2 sides together like we did for the legs. So you want to go into the first stitch, out of the last stitch, single crochet, and like we did with the leg, just continue to single crochet all the way across the top of the piece. And then when you finish that, you just need to leave a tail for sewing. To make the inner part of the ear, we're going to be using our black yarn, and this time we're working in rows instead of rounds. So begin with a slip knot and then chain 2. 1 and 2. In the second chain from the hook, which in this case is the first chain that we made, we're going to put an increase. 1 and 2. For row 2, we're going to chain 1, turn our work and do 2 increases. We're going to do an increase in the first stitch, and then an increase in the second stitch. Row 3, chain 1, turn your work. This time we're going to start with an increase. Do 2 single crochet after that, 1 and 2, and then we're going to increase in the last stitch. Row 4, chain and turn. This time we're going to do 1 increase, 4 single crochet and finish with an increase. And our final row is going to be chain 1, turn our work, and then just 8 single crochet across. And we're just going to cut a tail for this so we can sew it on. And that's all we need to do for the inner ear. The final piece that we're going to crochet in this video is going to be Jigglypuff's curl. We're going to begin with 6 single crochet in a magic circle. Round 2 is 6 increases. For round 3, we're going to do 3 single crochet, 3 increases repeated twice. Round 4 is 2 single crochet and an increase repeated 6 times. From this point, we're going to make the 2 parts of the curl. We're going to do the little bit on the side, and then we're going to do the larger bit separately. We're going to start off with the smaller bit, and to do that, for round 5, we're going to start with 4 single crochet. So I've done 1, 2, 3, and 4. Then what we're going to do is skip the next 16 stitches. In doing that, that's going to leave us with 4 stitches at the end of the round, and it's those that we want to work into. So fold your piece in half, and what I might do is get rid of this so it doesn't get in my way. So fold your piece in half, then turn it so you're looking at the opposite side from where you've just worked into. So I worked in here and I'm looking at the front now. I'm going to count backwards 4 stitches, starting at the last one. 1, 2, 3, and 4, and it's this 4th stitch that I want to work into. From the last stitch I did on the opposite side, I'm going to bring the head of my hook in and go straight into the 4th stitch I've just counted out to. Then single crochet, and then I'm just going to finish single crocheting until the end of the round, which is just 3 more single crochet that I need to do. 2, 3, and 4. For round 5, what I did was single crochet 4 across the start of the round, and then I single crocheted into the last 4 of the round. I've skipped all these stitches here. After doing round 5, we should now have 8 stitches in this side, the smaller side, and 16 free stitches in the larger side. We're going to continue working in the smaller side for now, and then later on we're going to come back in, join our yarn here, and finish this bit. Rounds 6, 7, and 8 of the smaller bit are each 8 single crochet. However, if you find it easier, what you can do is just do 24 single crochet consecutively. Round 9 is going to be the final round of the smaller part here, and we're going to do 2 single crochet, 1 decrease repeated twice. What we're going to do now is finish off, and we're going to do that in the same way that we finished off at the bottom of our ditto for those 2 bottom bumps. However, what we're going to do differently from that is to leave a slightly longer tail, because instead of weaving the end in to hide it, we're going to leave the tail and then later use that to sew the smaller part of the curl to the side of the larger part of the curl. Once that's done, we're just going to set our needle aside and leave the tail for now. The next step is to complete the larger part of the curl. You're going to insert your hook into one of the free stitches from the 16 that we skipped in round 5 of the smaller part here. It doesn't really matter which stitch that you work into because the rest of the pattern is round, there's no shaping involved, so you can really pick anyone, but I'm going to choose the stitch at the back here. So in round 5 of the small curl, when we skipped the 16 stitches, I counted out 4 from the last stitch. The 5th stitch from that last one, so I counted 1, 2, 3, 4. That 5th one is where I inserted my hook, so you can insert yours into the same position if you want to. Once you've worked into a stitch, you're going to bring in your pink yarn again, line that up behind your hook, yarn over, pull through, and then we're going to slip stitch to join. This slip stitch doesn't count as a stitch in our round, so we're going to do our first single crochet of round 5 of the larger part of the curl in that same stitch. Round 5 of the large curl is 7 single crochet, 1 increase done twice. I've just done my first single crochet, and because I worked into the last stitch, what I then need to do is turn my work and then go into the next free stitch on the opposite side. So you can see that this stitch here has been worked into. You can see the yarn there. So I need to work into this stitch. Into 2, and I'm just going to continue doing my 7 single crochet, 1 increase twice. At the end of round 5, we should now have 18 stitches in total in our round, and round 6 is just going to be 18 single crochet. After round 6, I'm just going to stop and add a little bit of stuffing to this part of the curl here. When the stuffing's been added, we're going to continue on with round 7, which is 1 single crochet followed by 1 increase, then 2 single crochet, 1 increase repeated 5 times, and we're going to finish off the round with 1 more single crochet. Rounds 8, 9 and 10 are each 24 single crochet. Round 11 is 6 single crochet and a decrease repeated 3 times. Both rounds 12 and 13 are 21 single crochet. Round 14 is going to be our final round, and it is 5 single crochet, 1 decrease, repeated 3 times. After round 14, we're just going to stop and then add the rest of our stuffing. When you've added all your stuffing, all you need to do is cut a tail, pull up with your hook, and we're done. Now that all our pieces are crocheted, we can begin assembling our Ditto and our Jigglypuff, and after that we're going to sew them together. I'm going to start off with Ditto because that's much easier. All I need to do is sew the arms on to the sides. What I like to do for both pieces, so I'll be doing this for both Ditto and for Jigglypuff, is before I start sewing on the loose pieces that I've crocheted, is to actually stuff the body pieces. This stuffing isn't going to be permanent. We're not going to be leaving it all in there. I just find it a lot easier to position and then sew on the extra pieces with the stuffing inside of the body. So I'm going to do that first. And that's probably going to be enough for Ditto here. I am going to stuff each of the arms, so I'll add a bit of stuffing to those too, but I'm going to do most of the stuffing after they're already about 3/4 sewn on. I find it easier to sew most of the piece on and then to add the rest of the stuffing after that. Position the arms on the side of the body and then pin them in place. And where you want to position the arms is entirely up to you. I like to have this one a little bit higher and I'll have this one down just a little bit lower. But again, you can choose where you want the arms to sit on the body. When you've got your arms pinned in place and you're happy with how they look, go ahead and sew them on. And like I said before, if you want to stop at about 3/4 of the way, so all the way around there, stop at about this point, add a little bit more stuffing if you need to, and then just finish your sewing. When you're finished sewing, what you need to do is secure your end. You can do this one of two ways. You can do what we've done with the ends previously, and that is weave it inside and then go through the backs of your stitches, or you can do what I'm going to do and just push your needle up through the arm itself where all that stuffing is, and then just weave it into the arm a few times. And then once you've gone through 3 or 4 times, just snip off any excess yarn. And with that, our ditto is ready to go. I'm just going to remove most of the stuffing. When I eventually put the two pieces together, I do like to have a little bit of stuffing in the bump, so I'll have some stuffing up here, here, and the 2 ones on the bottom. You can leave that in at this point, or if you would rather, you can just come back and add that in later. Now that ditto's all put together, we can go on to assembling our Jigglypuff, and I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to begin by adding stuffing to the body. Before we actually sew the pieces to the body, we're going to assemble the ones that need it. So that would be the inner ears and the outer ears, as well as the curl. For the ears, we're going to take our inner ear piece and we're going to sew those to the outer ear piece. When the ears are sewn together, we're then going to take the curl and thread the tail end of the smaller part through our needle. And then all we're going to do is curl that into the side of the bigger part, so like that, and you can make this as tight as you want it. And then we're just going to sew the smaller side to the larger side. With that out of the way, we're going to start putting our Jigglypuff together. I'm going to start with the curl, so that's going to go at the top of the head and in the center here. So I'm going to pin that in place. If you want to, what you can do is sew along the rest of the curl. I don't intend to do that. What I'm instead going to do is push my needle through the body to the tip of the curl here, and I'll put a few stitches in that. But then after that's done, I'm going to go back up and finish sewing here. So just if you want to, you can sew down the whole curl. I don't think it's really necessary, but if you'd rather be safe about it, go for it. And now that that's done, I'll just take out these pins, and we're going to finish off with all of these parts the same way we finished off Ditto's arms. You can either fold your piece inside out and weave the end in through the backs of your stitches, or you can just weave your end straight back into the piece you've just sewn on. After the curl, I'm going to add the ears. When the ears are done, we're next going to sew on the legs, and when we were making them, I think I mentioned that we're going to position them as if Jigglypuff was sitting down, so we're going to place them on the front of the body like this. And you want to make sure that when you sew them on, you're sewing in between the last 2 rounds. So the last 2 rounds are here. We want to sew them on to this space here. Don't sew them on to the final round, because those stitches we need to sew Jigglypuff to Ditto. So you're not sewing into these, you're sewing into the space above here. When sewing on the legs, I'm going to do something similar as to what I did with the curl. I'm going to sew this part on here first, but then I'm going to go up and add a couple of stitches here. This isn't super necessary, just something I like to do. So you can choose whether you want to do that as well or not. And after the legs, the last thing we need to add are the arms. So you're going to add some stuffing to those, pin them in place on the side of the body, and then sew them on. Okay, the last bit we need to do is the face. I'm going to be doing the Ditto face on the Jigglypuff. However, if you prefer to do just a normal Jigglypuff, you can crochet some eyes and add a mouth. But I'll be using a second pair of 14mm safety eyes. And I'm just going to take out most of this stuffing. And then I'm going to pop these in. I think I'll move those in a little bit closer. Okay, when the eyes are in position, you can put the backs on. And when that is done, what we're then going to do as the last step to assembling our Jigglypuff is to add the mouth. So we're just going to do that the exact same way that we did Dittos. You're going to grab your black yarn, your 3.5mm hook, and you're just going to join the black yarn and then slip stitch across the round. Okay, when Jigglypuff is all finished, it is time to put our two pieces together. Before you begin sewing, before you make any permanent changes, you can add a little bit of stuffing to each of them. I would recommend understuffing rather than overstuffing. I'm going to be adding a little bit of stuffing to the top two bumps here and the two down the bottom. And in Jigglypuff, I'm just going to put a little bit at the top of the head. If you're a bit concerned that you've put too much stuffing in one of your pieces and you're not sure they're going to fit together right, what you can do before you're sewing them together is to use stitch markers and pin them together in, I'd say, 6 or 8 places, and then see if they reverse into each other. If you've got too much stuffing, they're not going to fit, so that is one way to check. But I am just going to sew mine together now. All we need to do for this is take your longer end, so whichever piece you left that long end on, that's what we're going to use. Thread that through your needle. And you're going to lay your pieces face up, like that. And then for each of our Pokemon, we had 42 stitches in our final round, so the opening here is 42 stitches around, and the same with this opening here. All we're going to do is sew each of the stitches together, matching them up 1 for 1. And after you've sewn the two pieces together, we need to hide this end. This is probably the trickiest part, because to secure it properly, what we need to do is go to the inside of the piece and then weave our needle through the backs of the stitches. But because we can't turn any of the pieces inside out anymore, we've got to do this by feel. So you're just going to try and weave your needle in behind each of these stitches. And I like to do this 3 or 4 times, working in a back and forth motion, just to make sure it really is nice and secure. And with that, our reversible Pokemon is finished. Thank you all for watching. Consider subscribing if you haven't already, and I will be back next week with a new video. Bye!